for our stream to come up. I think it'll come up. We'll start. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome to you all. Welcome also to all of you who are watching this online, our weekly satsang. We have a lot of great questions once again, so I have to apologize in advance that we may not get to all the questions. We'll do the best we can. And we'll alternate, as always, between online questions and questions from our local students here. Let me just make sure this is all okay. I think it's okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Let us dive in. We have a couple of questions that have just come in. Let's see this. This is a question from Diego. Diego says, I find Vedanta to be the main source of knowledge when it comes to spiritual teachings. And it goes on, let's see, what is the difference between gaining moksha and finding inner peace, contentment, and balance in your life through other means, like a so-called Stoic person? Nice. There is by the way, Stoicism is an ancient Greek philosophy that says just you have to tough it out. It's basically the Stoic perspective, and that is to call upon your inner strength, and you know that whatever comes, you can handle it one way or the other. So just do the best you can and be strong and persevere. So can such a philosophy allow you to live a better life? Absolutely. Can finding other ways of finding inner peace, what does it say? Inner peace, contentment, and balance. I think, suppose someone finds inner peace and balance through using herbs. Some people do. Or how about essential oils? These are kind of these new age things. How about crystals? How's that? You have a special crystal, and that crystal gives you inner peace and balance. Nothing wrong with it. Honestly, I'm not saying. If it works for you, wonderful. I don't think it'll work for me. Crystals and herbs and oils, and they may be pleasant, no doubt, but I don't think it's going, for me as an individual, I don't think it would help me much. But I don't doubt that many people find such therapeutic modalities, if we can call it that, they find it helpful. Great. The shortcoming, however, is none of those modalities will give you perfect contentment, perfect inner peace. You get moments, while you're laying in your bathtub, surrounded by candles and all of this stuff, and the scented oil is going. Yeah, definitely you'll have some peace and contentment then. But after you get out of your bath and your spouse is angry at you for whatever reason, then that contentment is likely to go away. So what is the difference between moksha and finding inner peace through these other therapeutic modalities? Moksha means it doesn't come and go. So when you're in the bathtub or when you're dealing with your angry spouse, it makes no difference. You're okay, no matter what. And I think that's what's unique about moksha, and that is what is uniquely gained through these teachings of Advaita Vedanta. Next question is from Krishna. Krishna doesn't say where he lives. My question, here, Krishna from Boston. My question is, how does a spiritual seeker who is not yet enlightened maintain equanimity when faced with stresses and setbacks of daily life? Perfect question. And there's two ways of dealing with this. How does a spiritual seeker maintain, if by the word maintain you mean perfect equanimity in any and all situations? The answer is, forget it. It's simply not possible. Perfect equanimity is the consequence of moksha. So the issue then that Krishna is bringing up is what to do in the meantime. And the simple answer is you do the best you can. And then, of course, you want to draw upon these teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, especially of the Bhagavad Gita, when you're seeking equanimity in day-to-day situations. I think the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita are unequaled in giving you advice for how to do that. So what I would suggest is you do the best you can, and in the meanwhile, continue your every day. If you study a little bit of Bhagavad Gita every day, it can really change your outlook. So just in a very practical sense. So Krishna here, I work in management and consulting, and we deal with loaded senior management problems. What a headache. I'm glad I'm not doing that. So you can appreciate that Krishna is going to encounter many, many challenging situations in his profession. Suppose, before you head off to the office each morning, you spend 20 minutes with the Bhagavad Gita. Or 20 minutes of chanting, or 20 minutes of meditation, or 20 minutes of prayer before you go to work. That can help a lot. Okay, then. Here we go. We've been getting questions from the representative of this Gulmohar Orchid Society, this residential society in Pune. And another interesting question. This refers to your view on sannyasis, those who engage in worldly affairs like politics. You seem somewhat critical of sannyasis participating in politics. Yet, we've learned about Rajarshis, kingly sages, like Janaka and Vishwamitra, who upheld kshatriya dharma, the dharma of the kshatriyas, while pursuing spiritual goals. Okay. Here are just some comments. First of all, with regard to Rajarshis like Janaka and Vishwamitra, what I would say is, if there is any sannyasi today who is the equal to Janaka and Vishwamitra, who chooses to be in politics, go for it. You get my point. Doubtful. Highly doubtful. And the problem, so what I'm suggesting is that there's something fundamentally incompatible between politics and sannyasa as a life of full-time exclusive spiritual growth. And I do believe there is an incompatibility for this reason. Can you remain in politics, in real-life politics? Can a completely dharmic person survive in politics? Doesn't look like it. Which means one of two things are going to happen. Either the sannyasi, of course, is committed to dharma. So if that sannyasi is completely committed to dharma, how long will they last? They'll be out very quickly. What is the other option? That's right. In order to be in politics, you have to play that game. To play that game means adopting a dharmic means, and that is absolutely an obstacle for spiritual growth. So for this reason, I think that, again, if a sannyasi is enlightened, Janaka and Vishwamitra were enlightened. So if the sannyasi really is enlightened, perhaps. But generally, one takes to the life of sannyasa not because you're enlightened, but because you're seeking enlightenment. So for one who is seeking enlightenment, it does seem like politics would be a huge problem. Okay, Sajit in Dubai asks, the Trinity of Christianity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, each one are God, but are distinct from each others. And he's asking, suppose we compare this to Paramatma, Ishvara, and Jivatma, which we have in the Vedantic tradition. Are these similar in essence or understanding? Well, it's a surprisingly complicated question. First of all, Christians have been arguing for 2,000 years over the relationship of Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And these arguments have been so vigorous that great saints have been excommunicated and labeled as heretics. And there are multiple streams of thought today. Different groups will have different perspectives on this. So there's no unanimity among Christians even on the relationship. There is a standard understanding. I think the standard understanding, I should remember all this stuff. I was raised with this. Three beings who are one in essence. I think that's a phrase that they use. Three beings, meaning independent, who are one in essence. And how that's so, I don't know how they explain it. So is that theology the same as what we have in this Vedantic tradition? If you are a Vedantin, you can find similarity. If you are a Christian, you'll cringe at the idea of finding similarity. And of course we can find similar. By the way, this is not exactly related to Sajit's question, but when we look at other religious traditions, if we see similarities, we would expect to find differences, right? Different traditions. But when we see similarities, some people are surprised. Personally, I would be surprised if there were no similarities, because truth is universal. Human beings are human beings, so whatever is universal truth and whatever is a product of human beings, those are those cross cultures. So I would personally be surprised if we didn't find similarities. On the other hand, I don't need to say this, but just to make sure it's clear. The validity of any spiritual tradition doesn't require external confirmation. That is, the validity of what the ancient rishis taught doesn't depend on finding similarities in other religious traditions. Of course, the same would go for their standpoint. The sanctity of Christian teachings doesn't depend on any correlation with Hindu teachings. Every tradition is independent. Okay, another question here, and I'm going to go these are really good questions, so it's nice if I can go through some, then we'll take some questions here. This is from Malar in Coimbatore, near my Guru's ashram. I am trying to assimilate the concept of ahimsa, non-injury, and put it to practice in my daily life, but I find myself wishing revenge. Nice that you can to admit that is a really important thing. Many people don't like to admit when they have some problem. But Mahler very boldly, I think, excellent, to be able to admit it. Mahler says, I have been wronged by some in life, by some people. I tell myself that they will face the consequences by their own wrongdoing. And I just leave it like that. I walk away. But how do I deal with my vengeful thinking? Good question. And part of it, I think Mahler has part of it. I tell myself that they will face the consequences by their own wrongdoings. Okay, that's part of it. The other part of letting go, and there are many aspects. There's actually, this is a big and important topic with two issues that I think we should talk about here. One is at a psychological level. The other is at the level of the doctrine of karma. So at a psychological level, the observation is this. When you hold vengeance in your heart towards someone, that is, you continue to resent the person, you blame the person, you feel anger towards that person, and you want something bad to happen to that person. Tell me, those thoughts, how do they affect the other person? Not at all. How do they affect you? Significantly. So at a psychological level, to realize that holding on to this desire for vengeance hurts you and doesn't affect the other person at all. To be honest, they could care less about what you think. They don't care. That's why they hurt you in the first place. They don't care. So how is holding a grudge against someone going to affect them? Not at all. Okay, that's a psychological perspective. And it gives a reason to let go of vengeance, but it doesn't automatically make it go away because you still feel wronged. You blame the other person. And this is a big issue that we can deal with through the doctrine of karma fairly easily. The secret is to let go of blame. How? By the way, you can't just decide. When somebody says, oh, you have to forgive all those who have hurt you, don't blame them. Fine, how? And here's how, according to the doctrine of karma. People who hurt you are natural people or unnatural people. Everyone, natural means we're all born of nature. We're all natural beings. This is a much bigger topic. Is nature for you or against you? Does nature want to benefit you or harm you? And that should sound funny, because nature doesn't have an agenda. Nature is neither beneficial, nature has no desire at all, which means no desire to hurt you or to help you. Nature is, sorry to sound silly, nature is natural. So things happen in life. Whatever happens in life is natural. You get the birth of a child. Wonderful. Natural. You lose a loved one to illness. Is that any less natural than the birth of a child? Same. Nature brings us both wonderful things and horrible things. And indiscriminately, we are all subject to nature to nature's indiscriminate meting out of wonderful things and terrible things. That's life. This is a human condition. This is why Hindus believe you should avoid getting reborn, because every time you get reborn, you're subject to the whims of nature. This is the problem. So the person who hurt you is part of this nature. And to be very specific, is making mistakes natural or not? When a human being makes a mistake. Have you ever made a mistake? How many mistakes we've all made? Naturally. You get the point. So whoever hurt you made a horrible mistake. Yet, that mistake was natural. Therefore, you need not continue to blame them. You just, according to the doctrine of karma, whatever happens, happens for some karmic reason. We don't know, but we can presume perhaps at some prior time in this life or a prior life, there was some mistake that we made which caused great harm to someone else. By the way, have you ever made a mistake that really hurt someone? Sure. It happens. We all make mistakes. This is how we can let go of blame and find forgiveness. It's not a matter of will. You can't just decide to drop the blame. But you can, with this kind of thinking, recognize the inevitability of getting hurt in life, and therefore drop the blame. Okay, we'll see one more question here, and then take some questions. One more question online, and then take some questions here. This question comes from Stuart, who, I forget where Stuart lives, New York, I think. And Stuart is referring to my guru's Bhagavad Gita home study program. Very nice program. In the 1980s, when I was studying with him, he taught us the Bhagavad Gita over a period of 2 years. All of those classes were recorded, they were later transcribed, and finally they were edited. And they were edited into the Bhagavad Gita home study program, which is not a few pages. It's quite lengthy, extremely lengthy, because it's basically edited talks. And so by going through that Bhagavad Gita home study program, you get exactly what we received as students of his in the 1980s. Anyway, Stuart is studying that home study program and came across this passage which casts doubt on free will. So he quotes from the, let's see. Let me just read what he has highlighted here. So this comes from, these are my guru's words, edited. Something is expected by you, an action is to be performed by you because you are placed in a particular situation, therefore you have to do it. This is how Ishvara's karma works. Otherwise, why are you in this place at this time? Why are you not elsewhere? There is meaning here. You are in this place at this particular time, and because there is something to be done by you, this is the law of karma. And just to kind of clarify that, whatever is the situation we encounter, that situation is a product of karma. But that's a little more complicated than you think, because it's a product not only of your karma, but also of everyone else involved, which means it could be the product of the karma of thousands of people, depending on what it is. Suppose you invest in the stock market and it goes down. The stock market goes down because of one person? So there are thousands of people, millions of people involved in the activities of the stock market. So it's the karma of millions of people driving the stock market up and down. So whatever happens to you in life is the result not only of your own karma, but the karmas of so many other people. Bottom line is, karma determines the situation you face in the present moment, but according to the doctrine of karma, you have free will in terms of how you respond to the situation. Karma determines the situation, fine. You have free will about how you respond to that situation. But here comes the difficulty. But the situation is not random. Everything seems to have a cause and effect. There is no randomness in the creation, which is not exactly in keeping with modern science. To use, and this is my guru's words, to use Einstein's words, God does not play dice. Even if he did, God, being omniscient, would know exactly how the dice were going to fall. So, therefore, situations do not happen randomly. Well, that part is true. Situations do not happen randomly. They happen according to karma. But again, not just your karma, but according to everyone else's karmas as well. And no matter what the situation is, you still have free will in terms of how you respond to it. The problem here, which I think threw Stuart off here, there's no randomness in creation. To use Einstein's words, God does not play dice. 2 decades later, in fact, a decade after Einstein said it, he admitted he was wrong. He was wrong. And he later admitted he was wrong. God does play dice, which means there really is randomness in the world. Now, Puja Swami Tadatmananda was arguably the greatest modern teacher of Advaita Vedanta, but he wasn't a scientist. He knew that Einstein made that statement, but he didn't know what followed it, the so-called Copenhagen Convention, where all these big shot physicists got together and came up with a standard vision of physics, which included quantum effects, which include random effects. Anyway, complicated stuff. You wouldn't expect a great teacher of Advaita Vedanta to know all of this about quantum theory, which arose only this would be in the maybe 1920s, 1930s, was when it first came up. But it didn't really sink into modern minds until fairly recently. Now I think most people appreciate. You realize that something as simple as a LED, light emitting diode, depends on quantum theory, depends on quantum effects. That light could not light, would not illumine, if it weren't for the randomness of that's taught in quantum theory. So there'd be no LEDs. I mean, there'd be no TVs, there'd be no cell phones, no. In fact, all semiconductors require this quantum effect, which includes randomness. Okay, so I don't think I think Stuart was thrown by my guru's misquoting of science. By the way, I also do that. I make lots of references to science, but I occasionally make mistakes. What did we just say about mistakes? Natural. Perhaps I know a little bit more than my guru knew about science, but I'm no expert. I was trained as an engineer, and through the years I go on learning, but I'm absolutely not an expert in science. But I find drawing upon science. I find it helpful in the teachings of Advaita Vedanta, so I use it, I'll continue to use it, and I'll continue to make small mistakes from time to time. What can we do? But I think the point here is that the fact that Puja Swamiji has made a small error with regard to science, the bottom line remains unchanged. Situations we face are not random, actually, can include randomness. Honestly, here we have to add. Actually, I don't want to make a big thing of this, but in the Mahabharata, there is an analysis of the doctrine of karma, which includes randomness. It's unusual. By the way, in the Mahabharata, there are several contradictory interpretations of the doctrine of karma. The text is huge. And so depending on who happens to be teaching the doctrine of karma, you'll get several different versions. And that's the complexity of the doctrine of karma. One of them included randomness as a factor. So we can say that situations we encounter in life are partially due to our own actions, partially due to the actions of others, and partially due to randomness. No problem. But what remains is whatever is the situation, you still have free will in terms of how you respond to that situation. Okay, I think that's enough here. Do we have any questions here? Can we start in back? Here. There we go.
Hello. Namaste, Swamiji. One of the terms that I often hear in discussions on Brahman is the term Sakshi, witness.
Mm-hmm.
And as I understand the term, it implies somebody who is a silent observer, non-participatory, non-manipulating.
Mm-hmm.
So I wonder, as I travel this path for self-realization as Brahman, is that something that I should be focusing on in terms of being a silent observer, or, keeping away from things?
Okay. So, Sakshi is a technical term we use in Advaita Vedanta, not so much to describe Brahman, but to describe Atma, consciousness, your true self. So, what is taught is that whatever happens in your mind is revealed by consciousness, or we can put a different spin on it, so to speak, and say observed by consciousness, witnessed by consciousness. And the fact that the term Sakshi, witness, is used is to show the fact that the Sakshi, by definition, is an uninvolved observer. So someone who is not engaged in the activity that's being observed. And that's really important with regard to the mind, because whatever is happening in your mind is observed, but the observer, Sakshi, is not engaged. If the Sakshi is not engaged, the Sakshi is not affected. So when Advaita Vedanta teaches about that your true nature is as a Sakshi, witness, it's describing a truth of who you are. And to put that truth in simple terms, the consciousness by which you know what's happening in your mind is not affected by anything it observes. Like the sun is not affected by what it shines on. If it shines on a pile of filth, it doesn't become tainted. In the same way, consciousness, your consciousness, is not affected by whatever it reveals in your mind. Meaning, when there's sadness in your mind, that sadness doesn't taint consciousness. Sadness belongs to the mind. The consciousness that reveals that sadness remains utterly unaffected. So it's a teaching of the truth of who you are. Vedanta does not prescribe trying to maintain the attitude of a Sakshi at a psychological level at all times. And I think this is what you were suggesting, if I understood you correctly. And that is, Vedanta says I'm a Sakshi, a detached observer. Therefore, I should be detached and just observe. So I'm going to sit here and watch. And if I'm watching someone, suppose I'm watching someone walk along, and that person trips and falls on her face. I just watch. Detached. No, that's not at all what Vedanta teaches. So that idea of being a detached observer towards the world is not taught by Vedanta. In fact, that kind of detachment is indifference. And that becomes adharmic. To be indifferent to the suffering of others is to lack compassion and empathy, and not to engage in helping someone when you should be engaged is adharma. So the teaching about Sakshi is a teaching about who you are and not what you should do or how you should think. Does that answer your question? Good, good. Yeah, please.
Swamiji, physical sciences like physics, chemistry, biology, and social sciences, even humanities, they all relate to the real world.
As real as it happens to be.
So these sciences and humanities are as real as the real world.
Correct.
But mathematics, particularly pure mathematics, is not really related to the real world. It may be used, but mathematics doesn't care whether its principles are used in the real world or not. So, does mathematics represent the truth like Brahman?
I don't know. And there's a lot of this I'll admit right out is an area I'm not well enough informed about. There are many people who say mathematics is just another form of science. Others say it's a form of reasoning. Others will say that it transcends science, and I don't know. To me, this falls into the realm of philosophy, and as a teacher of Vedanta, I really don't know. One thing I know is that mathematics won't help you become enlightened. I think that goes probably without saying. Whether or not mathematics can go beyond. Actually, we can allow me to try to answer that question. Mathematics is a product of the human mind. Generations and generations of mathematicians have developed these spectacular mathematical devices, and really spectacular. But they're still the product of the human mind. So we can ask the question, is the human mind capable of going beyond the empirical world? And logically speaking, we would say probably not. So the human mind is limited to functioning at the worldly level and therefore incapable of going beyond. Now, I have no doubt there are some mathematicians who might argue with that, but that's how it looks according to Advaita Vedanta. We'll take one more question here.
So, going back to the free will I guess for me, I'm still not convinced free will exists.
You chose to ask this question.
But maybe the circumstances that
Oh, absolutely.
like
So look at this. There was a situation
okay.
that you had no control over. How did you respond to the situation? You chose to respond by asking a question, but you could have chosen not to respond to the question. Anyway, please continue with your with your question.
So what happened was I actually wasn't going to ask the question because I figured you didn't see me asking that. But then I was like, all right, I'm just not going to ask it. But then you pointed at me. And so that's why. So there was like...
Yeah. Proving what I said before is that situations are partially your karma and partially other people's karmas.
Okay.
The situation is a product of so many factors.
Okay.
But even though I pointed at you,
I could
you still could have chosen
That's true.
not to ask the question.
You're right. Okay. Yeah, okay. All right, that's about it then, really.
Okay, there's a follow-up question right here.
I can relate to what he said, because anything that happens, I'm assuming that it's a confluence of an infinite number of things. So it's as if this infinite confluence of things, they led to the only thing that could have happened. So, okay, he chose to make the question, but it wasn't, he chose,
Yeah.
but it's as if he didn't have any other choice because of the infinite number of experience that he had and the things that happened and you pointing at him, and everything led him to that choice.
No. Everything led to the situation. Everything led to the situation. In the situation, thank you. In the situation, he could have chosen either way. The situation did not force him to ask the question. If you say, but wouldn't it be natural? And look, here's an interesting argument. We can choose to do things which are unnatural for us. We do all the time. So you can't say that given the situation, he was naturally impelled to ask a question, but the fact is that we all can choose to do things which are unnatural given our natures. For example, I could start talking I won't, but I could start talking about sex. That would be extremely unnatural for a sannyasi and for me in particular to do that. But I could. I have free will. So does that work for you?
So now I have a choice. I can continue with this discussion. but again, everything, it still feels that because of all my psychological experiences and formation, the way my mind works, it will lead me to engage in a situation a certain way.
It will lead you, but we still have the inner freedom to reject what our mind leads us to. You know, what you're saying, absolutely true. Our minds are programmed. And that's mechanical. What you're saying is largely true, and that is our minds are highly, highly programmed, conditioned by all the experiences in our life. And that's part of what you call the infinite number of factors involved in every situation. But what is so remarkable is that in spite of all that conditioning, we can act contrary to our conditioning. And we can act out of character, as they say. Is that okay?
Yeah, I think that's how we evolve, actually.
Yeah. Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Okay, let's take some more questions online. Next question. Yeah, we have time. From Radhika, who lives in I always these Tamil and Malayalam words. Gosh, Tiruvananthapuram, which is why they say Trivandrum. A little easier on the tongue. Okay, this is Radhika, who asks, what decides the lifetime of a person? Is it simply past and present karma? Why should some children die so young without having a chance to live out the results of past karma or a chance to gain moksha? Okay. According to the doctrine of karma, everything is determined by karma, including lifespan. But again, karma includes not just your past karmas, it includes your present karmas, and it includes the karmas of others. Suppose you are born with prarabdha karma, the karmas you're born with, that determine you should live till 90. So you're born with good karma, maybe you have good genes, something. Anyway, you're born with good karma, and the amount of prarabdha karma determines that your natural lifespan is 90 years old. But then, suppose you use your free will to take up the smoking. Guess what? You probably won't make it to 90. So here's an example of someone whose present karmas affect their lifetime, not just past karmas. What about present karmas? And honestly, think about your lifestyle. I mean, probably, whether or not you smoke, but what about what you eat, lack of exercise? All of this can affect your longevity. So current karmas also affect you. And what about karmas of others? Somebody pulls out a gun and shoots you dead. God forbid. Somebody else's karma affects your lifetime, your lifespan. So, what affects the lifespan of a person? All kinds of karma. Why should some children die young? Suppose you're born with enough karma to live for 10 days. Happens. And if you say, how can that happen? Well, here, doctrine of karma is not some kind of scientific thing that we can study. We can't observe, we can't put it under a microscope, so to speak. So we know the principles of karma in a very general way. And as I said before, in the end, the doctrine of karma is a matter of belief. We can't prove it, we can't disprove it. On the other hand, it's a very helpful belief. So if an infant dies, and we understand that it's possible that this infant only had karma to live for a very short time. There's a story in the Mahabharata, early in the Mahabharata, there's a story of the 8 Vasus. Remember this story? They had, in a prior life, they had committed some terrible sins. And as a result, and I don't remember all the details, so anyway, we'll skip them. So as a result of their terrible sins, they were to be reborn. They were gods. But as a result of their terrible sins, they were reborn as humans. Oh my gosh. For a god, that's a huge demotion. We may not think so, but for them, they would consider it a huge demotion. And they were destined to, actually this shows the complexity of the doctrine of karma. So each one of them were born, and they were destined to live a long life of suffering. Except that they were born to goddess Ganga, who took each of the first 7 of these Vasus and drowned them in the river. Very, very interesting story. She was doing them a favor, as odd as that may seem. All of them except for the 8th, who became Bhishma, Devavrata originally, and was doomed to a miserable life and a miserable death on the so-called bed of arrows. Anyway, that's just to show the complexity of the doctrine of karma. Next question from from Stefano in Spain. Very nice. He's studying the Bhagavad Gita, and in verse 20 of chapter 2, verse 20, we see that the word, beautiful verse that starts with the word soul. Does anyone have a copy of the Gita? Or can you, if you can you just look up verse 20? Chapter 2, verse 20. I just want to see the Sanskrit. I don't. Dehi nosmin yata dehe. I might be, might not be. I'm not sure. Yes, I'm not good with the verse numbers. I think dehi nosmin yata dehe. See if that's right or not. In most translations, the beautiful verse starts with the word soul, which is then said to travel or transmigrate after death. My understanding of soul is a sukshma sharira, that's good, the subtle body, which is the one who travels after death and who moves from body to body, life after life. This makes total sense. My confusion starts later when the Gita says that the soul is unchanging. Thank you. So, najayate, najayate mriyate va kadachar, nayam bhutva bhavitacha nabhuya. So this, I maybe Stefano has got things a little reversed here. So this verse is in contrast to the word soul. So there are other verses. Can I go back and forth here? No. Okay. There are other verses that talk about soul. This verse is not talking about soul. This is verse 20. There are other verses talk about soul. Verse 20 is talking about Atma. It says Atma is ajaha, unborn, nityaha, eternal, shashvataha, eternal, ayam puranaha, ancient, nahanyate hanyamane sharire. It is not killed when the body is killed, but ajaha is a point here. So what we conventionally understand as soul is that which is born again and again. Thank you. The problem here is the use of, sorry to put it in this way, translations. The word, I'm going to just make a kind of a silly comment. In the Bhagavad Gita, you will not find the word soul used even once. Why? The word soul is an English word, right? So the Bhagavad Gita uses a variety of other terms, and in this opening part of chapter 2, the most common expression used is dehi. Deha is physical body. Dehi is that which is invested in the physical body, that which possesses a physical body. Now here comes the tricky question. Does dehi, the indweller of the physical body, does it mean sukshma sharira, that which travels? Or does it mean atma, your true self, pure consciousness, which does not travel? Which does dehi mean? And this is a trick question. Because that which dwells in the body could be either. The term dehi can indeed refer to the transmigrating sukshma sharira. The term dehi can also refer to atma, pure consciousness, and which meaning it has depends on context. So the word dehi is used in different ways in different verses, and the problem comes when a translator translates dehi as soul. Dehi doesn't mean soul. Dehi literally means the one who has a body. That's the literal meaning of it. It's called a possessive adjective. Dehin is its undeclined form. So does it mean soul? Does it mean atma? Depends on context. What it does mean is the one who is inside the body, the one who possesses the body. So I think what Stefano is struggling with here is the limitation of translations and the consequences of bad translations, which is why in our classes, you've observed the way I teach, and that is I'll use a Sanskrit word and then I'll give it a contextual definition, because every word depends on context. So when I teach chapter 2 and when I teach these verses, we don't use... One thing, I guess I learned this from my guru. My guru was allergic to the word soul. He says, well, soul, what are you talking about, soul? And he would say things, is it... I got to raise this up high enough so that you can see it on the screen. Is this soul? Where there's a kind of fish called soul? And even in English, soul has so many different meanings. And a good example, when I was a child, I was taught that when I die, my soul will go to heaven or hell. Fine. I was wondering, fine, what happens to me when I die? You tell me my soul goes to heaven or hell, but what happens to me? They wouldn't tell me that. In fact, we weren't supposed to ask questions in those days. Okay. We'll get just a couple more questions and we'll wrap up for today. Question from Jayant, who lives in Raipur. Raipur is Rajasthan? I don't even know. Raipur? Anyone know? I could be wrong. I've understood that we must overcome raga and dvesha. Remember our definition? Raga is a compulsion to chase after what you want. Dvesha is a compulsion to run away from what you don't want. We must strive to overcome raga, dvesha while living our lives. However, does that mean we shouldn't take a stand while making decisions during critical points in our life? For example, if a young person wants to go abroad for study or a job, and his parents tell him, don't go. Especially in India, this is a very common problem. A little less so in this country. American parents, you do whatever you want. Yeah. Anyway, some difference of culture here. So suppose a young person wants to come to America for work, and parents say, no. And should the young person abandon his plan? Okay. Raga and dvesha are definitely problems. So what karma yoga teaches is this. If your decisions are based on these compulsions to chase after what you want or run away from what you don't want, your whole life is going to be driven by these compulsions. Sometimes these compulsions will take you in the right direction. Sometimes they'll take you in a really harmful direction. Depends, we don't know. For most young people, coming to the US might be great. For some, it might be a huge mistake. So, and it depends on the individual, depends on the situation. So what Sri Krishna teaches in the Bhagavad Gita is that instead of making your decision based on raga and dvesha, you should make your decision based on dharma. What is the right thing to do? So in the case of a young person whose parents tell him or her, don't go to America for studies, it's a matter of dharma. And dharma depends entirely on the situation. There could be two very different situations. Let me just describe two possible situations. There are an infinite number of possibilities. Two possible situations would be that the parents are sick and elderly, and there are no other siblings around to take care of them. And this young person wants to leave them alone and come to the US to study. The parents, elderly, sick, and no other source of support. In that particular situation, to follow dharma might require the young person to set aside their desire to come to this country and study, and instead stay back to take care of parents. Possibility one, scenario one. On the other hand, there are parents who are very comfortable in their lives. They have all the material needs, they are healthy and happy, and they are so attached to their children that they will feel sad and forlorn and forsaken if their children go away. And they don't get it that by holding on to their children, they're preventing their children from thriving and growing in life, and they're acting very selfishly by insisting that the child not leave home when they have everything they need, good health, nice home, no problem at all, and yet they hold on. So in that situation, to follow dharma would actually, this is an interesting situation. If the young person doesn't leave, it's actually adharma. They have a responsibility to parents, but they also have a responsibility to oneself. Now look at this. If they fail in their responsibility to the parents, how much will the parents suffer? They'll feel sad for a while, and they'll get over it, right? But if they fail to take care of their responsibility for themselves, the long-term consequences could be huge. So when we weigh those two possibilities, the temporary sadness of the parents and the long-term consequences of not taking up proper studies, then every situation is different. You have to weigh. So to answer Giant's question, overcoming raga and dvesha, the first step is to let our decisions be guided by dharma. Not by desires, but by dharma. I think we'll take just one more question here. This one, let me just choose one here. Just for fun. It'd be nice to end our session with something kind of fun here. This question comes from Juan Carlos. Juan from Stuttgart, Germany. Nice. On November 13th, a congressional hearing on UFOs, unidentified flying objects, occurred, I think, in Washington, D.C. And phrases like non-human intelligence and interdimensional beings were spoken of during that event. Correct. Separately, the one word, separate from that, the one word that has shaken my core to the most from your teachings has been when I first heard the word Vishwarupa with regard to Ishvara in Bhagavad Gita classes. Because Hinduism includes the cosmos, Vishwarupa, like no other doctrine, what is your take on UFOs? I said just for fun. So first of all, what did the scriptures say about UFOs? Lots. Maybe all these devas are beings from some other planet. They didn't understand by the way, in ancient times, there was no possible way to understand life on another planet because this was the only planet in ancient cultures. There was no other planet other than Earth. But they were imaginative enough to imagine other lokas. Were these lokas physical, or were they heavenly, or were they hells? All of the above. In different ways they were understood in different contexts. So when the ancients talked about divine beings and other lokas, then that's the equivalent of what do you say, little green men living living on other planets. So there's nothing in ancient scriptures. The stories could actually confirm the existence of people living on other planets and UFOs. What does scientific thought have to say about it? They continue. There are two camps. One that says it's mathematically possible, and another camp that says it's mathematically impossible. It's mathematically possible because the number of planets out there. We know for a fact that there are the exact number is a gazillion habitable planets out there. We know this for a fact. In modern science, it's undebatable. There are indeed habitable planets out there. So that's the argument for UFOs, so the mathematical argument for. The mathematical argument against is those habitable planets are hundreds and millions of light years away. They're so distant that it's impossible for there to be any kind of travel between the two. Even communication, even radio waves, TV signals, etc. couldn't. So anyway, science will have both of these arguments. In this congressional hearing, they heard from some former governmental employees. I actually read. I took a moment to read this. I don't know why I read it, but I did. And it talks about former government employees saying, we found non-human biological matter. They claim to have found non-human biological matter. I'm going to test you right now. Is that a proof? The proof is when you show me the matter. This is a claim. They say, we saw it. Fine. I saw little green men around the corner. Just to say you saw it or experienced it doesn't prove anything. Proof is when some non-terrestrial material can be produced and examined. And that hasn't happened yet. Could it happen? Anything is possible. One thing we know for sure is it hasn't happened yet. But in the door comes the conspiracy theorists who say that the government the government has discovered it, but they're not telling anyone. It's being kept secret. There's no doubt that our government, like every government, has kept secrets. Why does a government keep secrets? Because they feel like the information would be harmful, right? That's what it comes down to. A government might choose to keep something secret if it's harmful. I'm not justifying it, I'm just explaining. That's why they did. During the Vietnam War, when I was young, every week we were told that 20, 30 people died. Hundreds of people died in that week, not 20 or 30. The numbers, grim time. Every day on a TV, Walter Cronkite would say how many people died this week. And the numbers he reported were probably off by a factor of 10, not because of Cronkite, These were the numbers released by the US government. So the government was intentionally misrepresenting the number of deaths happening in Vietnam because the government judged, again, not to justify it, the government thought that this information would be harmful. Harmful to the government's agenda, but I'll let you make your own decision on that. So here's the point. Would it be harmful to release information about the existence of extraterrestrial life? Would that be harmful? Most philosophers and thinkers, theologians, myself, would judge it to be helpful. Think about it. If you knew that the human species was not the only little dot of sentient life in the vast universe, if you learned that there were other sentient beings elsewhere, that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? Absolutely a good thing. So, for this reason, the conspiracy theorists who say that the government has found it, but is hiding it from public knowledge, it seems absolutely unlikely. That's my opinion. I can't prove that. I don't know anything about what the government is doing. But here's the reasoning. I think if the government truly had knowledge of extraterrestrial life, it would absolutely be revealed. And possibly, by the way, I'll just end with this comment, possibly during our lifetimes, we may learn of life living outside of our planet. So there are NASA and the European Space Agency, they have probes going to other planets, and they're looking for elementary life. We don't expect to find little green men, but they're looking for life. And if they find one living cell on another planet, what is the implication? The implication is life is not confined to this rock we call Earth. Life can flourish anywhere. And if you find one living cell here, there may be sentient beings far wiser than we are in some other place. Possible. Anything's possible. Okay, it was a good place to conclude. We'll end with our prayer. Om sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschid dukkha bhag bhavet, asato ma sadgamaya, tamaso ma jyotirgamaya, mrityorma amritangamaya. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om. See you next time.